Welcome to the Defence Connect podcast, Australia's leading voice in national security and defence industry intelligence, direct from the nation's top policy and business experts.
Welcome to the Defence Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty and a special guest from the US. We have former US Navy Special Warfare veteran and Blackwater private military contractor Trevor Fortner. He's served as a US Navy explosive ordnance disposal master training specialist, served on an Army Green Beret counter-terrorism team as a US Navy EOD specialist, worked alongside Tier 1 elements including SEAL Team 6 and Delta operators. He's led Blackwater's Ambassador Protection Detail, was a lead trainer for the UAE's Presidential Guard, served as a tactical commander for the US Ambassador's Diplomatic Security Service Protection Detail in Iraq. He's trained foreign counter-terrorism units and the Iraqi counter-terrorism EOD unit. He's done bilateral training with the ADF commando units from 2000 to 2002, also worked as an advisor in the UAE for Shamal Solutions, and today acts as a principal engineer and test architect at Raytheon Missiles Defense. Not only that, but he's got time also to be a consultant for EverydaySpy on the side, the tradecraft digital learning platform, and he's a keen sailor and former CrossFit owner from Cairns. Welcome to the podcast, Trevor.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate you having me today.
That's a long list. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that I just think, wow, how do you have the time for all of this? It's an amazing career. And
it's humbling to hear you read off some of those things, and just it's been 30 years of a challenging life for sure.
Yeah, wow, a life well lived for sure. It's very impressive. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about some of those experiences along the way for the US Navy, some of the different roles, because I imagine there's listeners out here who don't know a lot about explosive ordnance disposal and how, I guess, challenging that is. That would, I would suspect, be one of the more complicated roles from the military.
It actually is. And so the explosive ordnance disposal, or EOD, is the military's version of the bomb squad. Most military branches, Army, Marines, Air Force, from governments around the world, all have the same type of EOD capability. What separates the US Navy from our own individual Army and Marine Corps is that Navy EOD operators, before they go to that school, they have to become dive qualified in underwater ordnance. We go through parachuting and other type of insertion platforms. We do a lot of offensive driving, defensive driving, a multitude of shooting courses. So we augment our primary EOD bomb disablement capability with other skill sets that allow us to operate with SEAL teams, Green Beret units, Ranger units, and similar.
Yeah, I mean, even just when you see in the movies, obviously the explosive disposal, you're picking a wire and cutting it, that sort of thing. I can imagine that's a lot harder underwater after you've just parachuted in. It's pretty crazy. And your current work as well. You've previously been with Blackwater, with the private military company there. What was that like as well? That and the training alongside that for other units that you've done.
The Blackwater experience was definitely a highlight. That was coming out of the military in 2005, directly into Blackwater. Some of the guys on my team in Blackwater were actually teammates of mine in active duty with the Navy and the Army. So it was almost like you still had the same brotherhood. You just changed uniforms, changed paycheck. The training was as fast paced as it was in the military. The real unique difference was, instead of working for the military for a national system and a national culture with political strategic goals, as a contract company, you have to adhere to your contract. And so there's very specific rules that we followed under contracts. Even though we have our tactical skills, there was a new environment to us, whereas in military operations, you always have the support of the military. But when you work for a private contractor, particularly in the early 2000s, the war and the technology was moving so fast that there was a lot of unknown about regulations and accountability. And so, you can go back in early 2000s and look up a lot of the verbiage about bad actors such as DynCorp, Blackwater, Triple Canopy. And that's really misconstrued and gives private military companies a bad reputation, because the ones that I've worked for or ever interacted with were nothing but professionals. And the large reason for that is because most of those operators are prior veterans.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll get to that side of things later in the podcast, talking about PMCs. Let's just start off talking about the training that goes into training soft units or special operations personnel. Recently, we saw that Delta personnel were reportedly deployed in the presidential capture in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. What kind of training goes into an operation like that? I imagine it's several months of, I guess, hard training in terms of the actual entry and things like that, but then also mapping what, a presidential villa might look like and how long you have to get in there.
Yeah, so it's way more complex than a movie or somebody's going to actually tell you. Like, most people think about the capture as, little bird helicopters with Delta Force going in, boots on the ground, multiple gunfights, breaching of doors, and then extracting this individual. That's just the final culmination of potentially years of intelligence coming together from the logistics of just getting personnel in place on the ground to obtain intelligence and then filter through that intelligence via analysts that push that up to policymakers. Each one of those groups of individuals have been going through their respective schools and training. So it's probably a common culmination of 15 to 20 years of training of all these people that come together for an hour operation. And we just see the immediate 30 to 60 second clips on television of it. It involves anything from imaging, reading spatial imaging from human intelligence gathering and deciphering to the Delta Force actual tactical skill sets of shooting and moving.
Mm-hmm. I imagine there's a lot of work that goes into it from a training point of view, and you yourself, soft team trainer or counter-terrorism trainer, what are some of the main objectives that you would try to get across to a team like that before they go on this kind of operation? Some of the main skills and some main considerations.
It's really one of the really good things about the U.S. military, but the recent name changing of the Department of Defense to Department of War, is that our military personnel, we have accountability at the top of everything we do. Accountability, judgment, decision-making, those are all things that all the military units adhere to. And so when you take a group of elite operators that already have that fundamental core to them and then put them through training cycle after training cycle, and every training cycle ramps up the stress and the intensity to where it's nearly like being in the actual operation. And it takes time and resources to do that. That's where you become elite. And it just takes the determination of an individual to do a repetitive act thousands of times, consciously trying to improve every single time because it matters. And that's the type of dedication that we need on those units.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a normalizing of that operation. Just another day. You've already done this 100 times. Is that right?
So we hesitate to say that at work, but it comes through our mind. It's just, somebody asks us like, hey, how was it out there today? And you go, just another day in the office, which meant we had 3 grenades thrown at us, 2 VBIEDs detonated, and 1 guy's severely injured. And you try not to say it's just another day, but it is your job. It is literally another day. And so we have to be very cognizant of not becoming complacent. And this is why, in particularly elite units, you have to earn your job every day. And people think like this is a reality check for people when they get through a certain training pipeline and they put something on, they get pinned on their chest with something. They think, oh, I finally made it. Mate, welcome to day one of the hardest and best job you'll ever have, because there is always a man or a woman to your left or right that's trying to outperform you because they want to go on the next mission. And they're comparing themselves against you, who's in the top 1%. And that never stops. It just keeps going and keeps going.
It's a good way of looking at it. I hadn't thought about that. From a trainer point of view, is there ever a moment when you personally might go, wow, I wish I could go on that mission. That looks really great. I've been part of the experience for the last 6 months.
Yeah, there's an old saying about instructors that those who can do, and those who can't teach, which I think is one of the dumbest sayings ever. I had an instructor say that to me one time, and I said, well, I really don't want to be taught by someone who has not or cannot do the job. Now, I understand there's some things like, I can be taught by somebody that's never been shot at. And one of the best shooting mentors I've ever had is an Olympic shooter that's never been in a gunfight and never wants to get in a gunfight. But he has skills that he can teach me about economy of motion. So there's no ego that I'm not willing to be taught by somebody like that. But as an instructor coming from that background, yeah, you see the young guys getting spun up, ready to go. And more than anything, it's not that you necessarily miss the work, you miss the community and the brotherhood. And because you're older and more experienced, you wish you could go back on a mission with them just to advise them and go, hey, watch out for this, what? But we cannot. And that's where in our training as instructors, we have to bring you the most realistic training possible for the area that you're going to operate in, because it's up to us to prepare you. And that's one of the reasons that after I left the military that I stayed in somewhat of an instructing and consulting role, because I have a passion from some instructors that taught me things that they taught me have saved my life on more occasions than I can count. And I wanted to be able to pay that back to the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see here you're in those sort of instructor roles and protection roles for a long time. And I imagine that's the other side of the coin. You have, I guess, teams going in to do this sort of raids, but the other side of the coin is that protective role, which you served as a protection security specialist. How can protection security specialists respond to these kind of decapitation strikes that we might be seeing more into the future in terms of global context? It's a big question, and it's probably the $1 million question.
Large question. I'll break it down a little bit. A single protection unit will never stand a chance against a state power. Like you're just too small, too under-equipped. You don't have enough resources. Therefore, your protection detail has to be tightly integrated with the other unit, the intelligence unit. You have to have by communication. It has to go from the intels to you, from you back to them. You need logistical support. You need area support for areas that your protectee may visit. You can't just go out, 200 miles away from your home base and expect to legitimately protect them because you're away from your home base. So one of the issues with Maduro's is that he had not only Venezuelan people on his security detail, he had Colombian advisors as well. And so right there, you have two different nations, you have two different chain of commands, even though they're going to tell you there's going to be a single chain of command. I've worked with multiple nations before. Every nation always has its own chain of command. And that's a delay. It's a delay in decision-making. It's a delay in reporting. And those things, that simple having two different nations protecting a single person, that allows for a risk gap that we're absolutely going to highlight as a vulnerability and then exploit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in the case of Maduro, I think there was a US carrier off Caracas, off the Venezuela coast for a good month there. And so it was, from an Australian point of view, it was a surprise that this mission from the US was so successful because there was a lot of lead up time in theory. What
you mean lead up for Venezuela to defend their president?
Both that and preparation time. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
what's your thoughts on that?
Sorry.
I mean, it's
maybe if you were, I don't want to call out any particular country, but just pick any country besides the United States. Maybe he would still be president in Venezuela, but you come and get the United States military with a commander like Trump who says, this is the end result that I want. And then you take your hands off and just tell Delta Force, go solve this problem. That's where our operators excel. Like, you don't have to tell us how to go do a job. It's one of the things that make us elite as opposed to just a competent person. Our ability to make difficult decisions and judgments under pressure is phenomenal. And so that's one of the key things, is that not micromanaging the mission and just saying, these are our objectives, please go execute it. You have the best literally the best operators in the world doing that mission, from the pilots to the boots on the ground, to the analysts behind the scenes, to the troops on that carrier. Like, it was all a purposely driven event.
Yeah. And I can imagine as well, in terms of the people that you want doing a raid, you definitely want US operators on that front. I mean, there can't be many militaries that are better than that, have the better resources and support for that. We'll just go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about PMCs and Blackwater. Welcome back to Defence Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty, and we're talking about PMCs now. So private military companies. Obviously, Trevor, you led Blackwater's ambassador protection detail and later trained some international forces, including the UAE Presidential Guard. And PMCs have always been, they've been on a bit of a slippery slope. I think you mentioned since Afghanistan and Iraq, with certain areas of the public and the media. But we're seeing a resurgence in those types of companies now with Ukraine. I mean, we've seen Wagner Group, which is Russian one, hit the headlines for the last couple of years. Certainly there's been a lot of activity in Africa. What do most civilians misunderstand about private military contractors and how they work on a personnel level? So,
yeah, I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is that the term mercenary gets attached to private military contractors, and the term contract is very important in this. So when you think of a mercenary, you think of some potentially lawless individual that just wants to be paid so they can go shoot a gun. And that's not the case with professional private military contracts. Most of the people that are employed by them, they've already been trained by a host nation in very specific skills, and they've proven themselves that they're quite competent in those skill sets. And then, of course, the private military company will offer you additional training and keep you current. So I'd like people to understand that it's not a bunch of musclehead, meathead guys running around with guns. It happens. I've seen it in early days in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the professional companies like DynCorp, Triple Canopy, Blackwater, back in those days, they were professional veterans that were in those companies.
I guess that cartoon example of the mercenary just doesn't quite fit there. And from a point of view, has that image changed over time because private military companies have made a conscious effort to be smarter with their optics than that period of time? Or was it just, I guess, an eventuality that the professional conduct side, the responsibility side, was going to come through eventually and demystify it a bit?
No, I think there's been some private military companies, and I won't say their names, that have been around for decades, well before the 2000s. They operate very professionally, and I'll say they know how to stay out of the public image. Well, obviously, early 2000s, there's every journalist trying to get to Iraq and Afghanistan. They're trying to embed with troops. They're trying to embed with private military companies to make sensational headlines, right? And so what we saw was any bad instance that happened, whether it was a firefight or a political statement that was said, if it could be tied to a private military company, which deflects it away from the US military, then they could kind of be the scapegoat and take that. And there's, Blackwater became a scapegoat for the Department of State at one point. It's disgusting to see, but when you look back at how fast and rapid things were evolving in the early and mid 2000s, there's going to be some growing pains. And fortunately, what I see now with private military companies is that, as you said, they did learn from those optics, and now they're looking at, we can still provide highly skilled, efficient individuals for a contract, and when we do so by a smaller footprint and increase speed and delivery. Back to the regulation side is now we're actually looking at our contracts that they cover much more in depth of what you can and can't do, what your scope of work is. They cover what if scenarios that previously they hadn't happened yet. But now that we have, 2 decades of historical context coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan with heavy use of PMCs, there's a lot of lessons that are being learned and incorporated. So I think private military contract companies, they're going to continue to grow. They're just going to be used more of either a strategical asset or a force multiplier, so that we can take over, or private military companies can take over jobs that would allow the military to focus on other tasks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I imagine, with the US pacing rival in China and the way things are going competition-wise there, you probably want your US military focused on bigger goals. You might operate your PMCs a bit differently. From what we've seen in the news, Blackwater's had a bit of a recovery and is sort of making some headlines that there's potential deployments internationally. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think you'll have a look at that employment again, or is there a place for you there?
I probably won't. I have it's a young man's game. It's a young man's game that it needs to be played by young men. At some point in my life, I have to acknowledge that it's very difficult to say that you would become a liability to swallow that pill. But I was talking to a former teammate of mine last week, and we're talking about waking up and shooting. And I said, I might shoot once a month, but it's only a magazine, 10, 15 rounds. I'll go out and I'll hit the target and go, yeah, that's good. It's better than
enough.
People around. It's enough to maintain what I have. If I were to try to go back into one of those elite units, I honestly don't think, people don't understand how skilled they are. You can take 12 men and put them in a complex together. They'll never speak a word to one another. They'll look at each other and know exactly what you are about to do, and they know what to do to assist you and never say a word. Right now, we are so far, even though our skill level is high, it's so far out of reality to even consider to go back to one of those units. So to answer your direct question, I don't see myself reaching out to any of them asking to go back overseas.
Maybe there's an advisory role there, a desk role, if you want it.
Yeah, maybe so. It's in a supporting role somehow.
We'll go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the defense industry. Welcome back to Defense Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty. We're talking about defense tech sector. And Trevor, you've been working with Raytheon Missiles and Defense. I imagine you get to see all the cool toys there. They've got the drones and artificial intelligence, and we've got some unmanned aircraft and missiles and things like that. What's the modern battlefield look like from where you're sitting in a very heavily involved area of the defense industry? How's it evolving?
It's different from 2 decades ago, that's for sure. If you just look at Ukraine as I hate to say as a test bed, it's no longer about as a platform, whether it's air superiority or tank superiority. The battlefield is now a network. It's a network of sensors, from ground sensors, vehicle sensors, aerial platform mounted sensors on human beings. All that network data has to go somewhere and get assimilated. That's a unique challenge that we're going through right now, is to take all this data that comes from the battlefield and organize it in a clear picture and do so in a timely manner. And so you can look at the units from the Marine Corps and the Army here in the United States right now, and you can look at how they're forging themselves going forward. There's not a lot of this large, massive ground force units anymore. We're not going to do a D-Day Normandy invasion like in France. It's not the way wars are being fought, and we haven't.
Nor would you want to, based on the outcomes there either.
No, you would. There'd be no reason to fight these wars. I mean, most of the wars that we're fighting right now, we probably shouldn't be fighting them, right? It's not about technology. Wars are fought because technology is developed throughout them. But the fact that we're fighting is because people have an issue with one another.
I guess on that track as well, the US strategy and policy in terms of defense industry has changed quite a lot, even within the last year. And I mean, we've recently seen as well, out of Canada as well, their national strategy and the US is becoming more about self-sufficiency and industrial uplift for the benefit of your own country, less reliance on overseas defense industry. Are you seeing that in terms of your own work day to day, or is it something that people can sense in your area as well?
You said, is it something that people can sense? Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are just naive to it because it is absolutely happening. I relate this to like an emergency preparedness disaster plan for your family. Like, you rely on going to the grocery store to get water and milk, maybe 2-3 times a week. When I lived on a sailboat, I had to plan that stuff out for 3, 4, 5 months. Now, when I teach people emergency disaster preparedness, the question becomes, it's not about the disaster. It's how long do you want to survive during the disaster? So if you want to have 3 gallons of water, cool. If you want to have 6, that's fine. But you have to understand how long the duration is that you can survive. And so that's what we're seeing globally after COVID, when the supply chains were just crippled and crushed globally. There was a shortage everywhere of almost every item. And countries took notice, leaders took notice and said, oh my gosh, we are so relying on this country for this product. If they stopped shipping that product to us, what would that do to our ability to maintain normalcy? And as you go through and look at that over the last couple of years, you realize we live, use our grocery stores as an example. Our grocery stores currently are designed for high turnover. So they may bring in stock once a week, and it's just enough stock for their weekly trend, right? Mm-hmm. They don't hold a lot of stock in a stock room. Number one, it's cost effective. Number two, they don't need the building infrastructure. And again, it goes back to being cost effective. What we learned was, well, after a week, if that truck doesn't show back up, now you're out. Normalcy is no longer normal. There has to be shortages. And that's what we are doing as a country on a global scale. It's not just the US that's starting to recognize this. So in the engineering and defense world, it's not so much that we want to develop new, amazing platforms that will take 15 to 20 years. What we want to do is increase our production output, increase the quantity, decrease the time that it takes to produce that quantity, and then be able to backfill if there's a surge or increase in demand. And that's the trend that I see over the next couple of years.
Keeping those shelves stocked, I guess. And I think Palmer Luckey, who was another US citizen there, he spoke about America becoming the gun store of the world and have everything on the shelves. You're selling a few, but the shelves are always stocked.
Now that is a man that I would absolutely go and work for.
I hear Anduril's hiring. There'd be plenty of roles there, I reckon. But
yeah, you know what? They were actually hiring for an executive protection person, and I thought it would be kind of comical.
Throw the hat in.
Resume.
Throw the hat into the ring for that?
Yeah, I said, hey, not only am I executive protection, I'm also an engineer at this other company. I never heard back from them, so I'm not sweating that. But they are developing some really cool products. One of the things that I like most about them is that because Palmer Luckey, he's got his wealth, he just says, go build it. Like, let's get this built. I'll give you the money. Here's a bunch of young, smart, intelligent college graduates with some senior engineers overseeing them. Go build these products and build them reliably, build them quickly. And I think I'd love to see what that company's going to look like in 5 to 10 years.
One of the standouts for me that I saw, one of their Fury aircraft, unmanned aircraft, and they said, oh, well, we can build a military engine to power this thing, but it's going to be easier just to put a commercial jet engine in and easier to make and more production value. So I thought that was quite a good highlight out of them. In terms of, you would have some association with the Department of War as well. We spoke about it earlier. We see a new trend out of there that there's a warrior culture. They want to promote a warrior culture within the Department of War and within the military, US military. From a trainer's point of view, is that a good thing to do? And how does that work exactly? I mean, you would have seen that within your training of soft teams and different teams like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A few years ago, the military and the U.S. corporation, they started going through this DEI, this, diversity inclusion. And they're starting to realize how much of a backfire that was, because what people wouldn't acknowledge is that our military is unbelievably already diverse, and we want it to be diverse. We want different cultures and backgrounds and experiences to come together. And then we put you through a boot camp and a training to all bring you into an alignment. We're not trying to change who your identity was. We're just trying to bring you into an alignment. And somewhere along the lines over the last couple of decades, we stopped doing that. And we allowed people to become individuals inside of a military organization, and that's not acceptable. So going back to this warrior culture, I love the fact that they use the term warrior, but some people are going to interpret that like they misinterpret a mercenary. Like, a warrior to us is a person that has ownership, that has accountability, that maintains standards, and they expect standards, and they expect them to be high, and the trust that they have of themselves to make a decisions, and of their teammates and their subordinates in an elite unit is phenomenal. And that's kind of where I would like to see the Department of War start to head, is more of the units, not be just so, hey, we're going to do this DEI and I don't agree with this policy. In the military, you don't get the choice or the luxury to agree. There's standards and there's rules for a reason. And I think renaming the Department of Defense to Department of War, and then bringing this culture of accountability and ownership back, it will take a few years to see a positive change in it. But I think it's probably, makes me almost want to be 18 again and sign up.
Part of that as well, you obviously are going to have a warrior culture, which is going to be your policy moving forward. And you're going to get those people that are, going back to the way that it was, as you said, but you're going to lose some of the people along the way that were the individuals in the military. That's potentially a cost that the US military can afford because they have so many personnel, you think?
Yeah, there's always a downside to it, but it comes down to this analogy, and I don't mean to disrespect a soldier as compared to a special operations person. What I mean by that is, we say in special operations, I would rather have, 10 special forces than 100 soldiers. And that's because the 10 special forces, they have year of more training and experience, which allows them to make better decisions under stressful conditions than what 100 soldiers would. And it's similar to the decapitation effort that we just did in Venezuela. The reason we went after the top person is because now you have the subordinates that don't have the capability as a leader should have. And I'm not saying he did have, he was just in that position. And so
I think we can say,
troops.
I think we could say Maduro sort of held it together for many years. I don't know how many years he was leader, but there must have been leadership there. He
held it together for a number of years, right? It's a good history to go back and research. But the reality of us losing personnel is, as long as you bring in X number, that their quantifiable skill sets are outperform the mass exodus of people, then your net sum increases, right?
Mm-hmm. Are we on the back foot here in terms of Western militaries when we talk about warrior culture? I imagine that if you were going to look at foreign pacing rivals such as China or Russia, they would generally be considered to have a warrior culture implemented across the history of their military. Would you say that's a correct characterization, that we might be behind the 8 ball on this?
Oh, I definitely, without a doubt, the excluding special elite military units, if you look at, you can simply look at the weight, like the physical weight of our enlisted troops across the United States and compare that to China. And you'll see hands down, China's fitter, like hands down. And so if you just look at the obesity rate of our military and then start to think about, really, like, are they skilled soldiers if they can't take care of their nutrition in their own human body? And then their leadership doesn't hold them accountable to the standards. Instead, we increase the standards to allow them to come in. We did that for a number of years, and now we're finally putting a stop to it. So it will take us a little bit of time to catch back up to those other nations. Most definitely so.
Mm-hmm. On the training side of things as well, you've obviously worked with the leadership side throughout your career, under extraordinary pressure, I might suspect as well. In terms of leadership traits, how easy is it to identify, that elite level personnel as they go through training? What are some of the characteristics you look for?
Calmness and clarity. Like that's what we're really looking for. When we design a training scenario, part of the objective will to increase your stress, whether it's mental stress or physical stress or a combination of the two. And then what we're looking at is who can maintain the clarity of the situation around them and continue to make logical judgments and not do it emotionally. And surprisingly, not many people do that well. It was so surprising to me that I actually developed a framework that I teach people, because when we went through training, 20, 25 years ago, there wasn't really a framework to learn this ability. It was just, they watched who survived after a few months of training, and then you went to the next training. But there is a framework that we can use, and it evolves around maintaining your awareness and your clarity. And think about it from the troops down, right? Like the troops looking up, it's really not about if my OIC, my officer in charge, makes the correct decision. Like if they make a decision and they have clarity, there's a reason they made that decision. And what we find out later is that the decision is sometimes just to keep my options open. And that's the final thing that elite operators do, and is that we don't make decisions that are irreversible. You made a comment about cutting a wire on a bomb underwater. It must be challenging and difficult. Well, that's something, and when we disarm bombs, is we have to be willing to accept the consequences of the next action. And one of the pillars not to violate is we don't make decisions that we cannot recover from.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah. And that's what we look for in leadership. Like, because we define leadership a certain way. You might have a sports captain that might not be the best player, but they have high energy. They can bring the team together. Everybody likes them and everybody wants to listen to them. That's applicable leadership as a captain in a sports team. But in the military, I don't have to like my leader. It helps, but I don't have to. I have to make sure I will believe in my leader if they maintain clarity of the situation and they make decisions that don't stop our progress.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I thought we'd go through a bit of a rapid fire round of questions that you weren't briefed on. So these are pretty straightforward, just ones from your own experience. First rapid fire one: best non-US military personnel you've worked with. This can be any international nation or company.
Oh, non-US military?
Yeah, that's the one.
Japan.
Really? Wow. That's a surprising choice.
I could go down the list of the countries and find something positive about every country that I've worked with. But Japan, probably because it was the first country I was stationed in outside of the United States.
It was the food, wasn't it? That was the thing.
The food is amazing. It's really their culture on a national level, not just their military. Like the respect that they have for their government, for their population, for their neighbors. It's embodied in their military. Like the respect that the military shows to its own population is phenomenal. And of course, their population respects their military, but it's really a two-way thing. And to be stationed with them in the environment and to see how they were compared to my early years of our military, I always think back about how professional and polite they were. And skilled, absolutely skilled, but they were also very professional and polite.
And we can see them coming back up in terms of defense strategy as well. They've just sort of announced some progress there and some funding to bring their military back into full-time operation, I guess. We'll go to, I think we've answered this already, but hardest SOF or EOD skill to master. I think you're going to say calm under pressure, calm decision-making.
No, that's one of my skill sets that I didn't know that I had until I went through these programs. The most difficult thing I think to do is to do nothing. And doing nothing is actually, like I say, you're doing something, you're taking an action. From an outside perspective view, it's going to look like you're doing nothing, but I'm pausing, and I'm pausing for very specific reasons. And sometimes you have people that are looking at you for answers and they don't understand why you're pausing. That to me was one of the hardest things to overcome. And fortunately, I had this amazing mentor in the Navy. His first name's Mike, that taught me a couple of things to help buy myself time. And that's probably the most challenging thing. Like, that skill wise and operationally wise, people think like, oh, the push-ups, the running, and the swimming. My mate, it's just physical fitness. You either do it or you don't do it. And you make a decision every day you wake up. I'm not quitting. It's not that hard. You just don't stop. It's the mental aspect that you can't see unless you actually go through the training. And that's the difficult part.
What about most reliable software EOD piece of equipment? So that one tool or piece of equipment that you always had on you and you knew, oh, this thing's not going to let up on me.
And every veteran in the world just screamed 550 core and rigger's tape or 500 mile an hour tape. Like, those two things will solve a lot of problems.
Can you remember any instances where they just came through for you and you're like, oh, this is just the best item ever?
Oh,
any specific ones?
Yeah. When we got, I say when we have the capability to be at depth underwater to know our precise location, like, that's pretty phenomenal. I mean, back in the day, you know where you enter the water and where you go to depth, and you have a compass, and you, through training and lots of training and taking notes, know, if I kick at this particular pace for 20 minutes in this sea state, I've covered about this much distance. I should be dead reckoning here. As technology advances, you could have your GPS position underwater with you with, additional maps. Like, I did a dive job recently in Puerto Rico, looking at some ordnance as a civilian on a government contract. And it was amazing to do a reconnaissance of this ordnance item off the coast of Puerto Rico. I had a computer with me underwater, and I could do the entire research within a matter of a couple of seconds, where historically I would have to complete the dive, come back with some notes, go to some books or a laptop, spend a few hours doing some research, a few confirmations. And now we can do it with technology in seconds. So that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the next thing is just to send the drone to go and do it, right? That's the next. We're probably already at that point.
It is, man. And so here's kind of a scary thing to consider, right? Like, I love the technology, and I love the convenience that it provides for us, but I'm still a firm believer in, like, don't rely on your GPS. Know how to use a map and a compass. Right? Read a map, know cardinal directions, and know how to use a compass. Know that putting a compass on the hood of your metal car is going to affect your magnetic compass. Crazy, most people will know that. Because again, if you lose, we talked about this with the US, understanding that our supply chain is critical and we need to kind of be more self-sufficient. People should be more self-sufficient too. And what I worry about all this technology advance, when you bring all this information in, it takes us weeks to read it, right? Well, now we have machine learning and AI that will compile all this data in fractions of a second and spit out a response. What scares me is that response. A human still needs to be in the loop to read that response and then take action on it or not take action on the response. Basically, you have to vet that response. My fear is that one day we will have so much information that we will start to put too much trust into the AI response. We won't vet that response. We'll just take it as, as gospel truth. And that removes the human out of the loop. And that's what scares me about the increase in technology, even though I love the technology.
I think it's a valid concern. I mean, from my own profession as a journalist, we see that every day, having to vet stuff that's been churned out of AI and different press releases and stuff. It's a minefield.
I can't imagine what you have to go through. It's almost like you have to just go back to the human conversation. Like, I verbally heard it from their physical face, because if not, how do I vet that it's actually them that said it?
And last question, I thought this one would be a good one. From your own training, so when you're doing your own training, what was the greatest light bulb moment of clarity from your own EOD and soft training? This is like those those moments where it all clicks together and you go, oh, that's how it works, or that's how it's supposed to be.
It's I had this student one year. That one of the reasons I was teaching at this exact moment in time was because my unit had been operational overseas, and we understood that we were going to have a surge of new people coming through. So they pulled a few of us that had experience to go become trainers. And there was one individual that, oh man, we butted heads for the entire, I think it was a 4-week course. And I'd made him do something uncomfortable one night, which is basically just lay down and look at the stars, replicating that he died doing a procedure. And his team, I wouldn't let him move. And his team had to step over him in and out all night long. And he was really upset about that. And I told him I wanted to think about his actions. Like, you just did an irreversible action that cost not only your life, but the life of your entire team. And in a couple of weeks, you're going to be over in Afghanistan, and this is going to matter. Even though we butted heads, a couple of months later, he wrote me an email, a really short, simple statement. He said, whatever my title was at the time, he said, I just wanted to reach out from overseas and say thank you for your professionalism and not letting what I did go. It saved my life. And that was the end of the email. So that was a moment I realized, if I show up at work and put everything into teaching you that I can with passion, because I know you're, particularly disarming bombs, your life is at risk as well as other people's lives. And so I took that very serious. But up until that point, myself and a couple of my close teammates were the only people that I had as a baseline. We knew that there was consequences, but the new people that we were training, they hadn't been to war yet. And to realize that I showed up present that day for his training and held him accountable and just didn't go, you know what, you passed, it's 7:00, let's get to the bar. It saved his life. And now he's married, he has children. I'm really happy for that. So that's the aha moment that most people don't get to see.
That is an amazing moment. That responsibility and knowing that you did the right thing on the day, and had flow-on effects. Amazing. And a good way to wrap up the podcast as well. Thanks for coming on, Trevor, and we hope you had a good time. Have you back anytime.
I appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much.